to Test This, the podcast designed to help software testers understand risk and adopt new testing solutions with ease and confidence. Your host is Mahamadou, a quality assurance consultant with over 10 years of experience across multiple industries. In each episode, he'll talk to different experts and learn from them about how they test.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Kevin Martinez. Kevin is a software architect at Orbitant. He is a leading expert in full-stack development, React, Nest.js, cloud architectures, expert in developer experience, DX, and also expert in web accessibility. With over 10 years of experience, including being a JavaScript and Cypress instructor, Kevin understands perfectly why so many teams struggle with testing. To solve the common problems of slow setups and complex workflows, he created Testing While Developing, TWD for short, an open source approach that brings automated testing directly into the live browser environment. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. It was amazing. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. In this episode, we'll be mainly talking about testing while developing approach. We'll start with Kevin's background and experience. Then we'll discuss what is TWD and why it's worth learning. Next, we'll talk about common mistakes to avoid and good practices. After that, we'll share practical tips to make the most out of it. And to conclude, we will provide tips to level up with testing while developing, approach, and beyond. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Kevin. Can you share how you became a developer and also how you got involved in testing?
Yes, well, I study electronical engineer, but I fell in love into software development with a few courses and my first job. And then I mostly learn by myself with courses. And when I started working in more complex project, like developing front-end application for microservice, I started to notice that the testing part was super important, and I started playing with different tools at that time, like Cypress. I remember there was Cypress version 8, and then I started working with unit testing, integration testing, mostly related to development. And I really fell in love with the testing because it's something that nobody talks a lot, and it's a huge part of the development process. And after some years working with these tools, I found some issues that they solve it in a certain way, but for me it wasn't enough. And that's why I started thinking about this idea of TWD.
Okay. In my career as a QA, I work with a lot of developers and they are not fan of testing. So what frustration did you see and what inspired you to not only be focused on testing, but also creating TDW framework?
That's a really good question, something that we saw every day with developers, right? So the thing with development is that we want to provide solution and create new stuff. And when you create it, what you end up at the end of that feature is having feedback from your colleagues to create test. So testing becomes an extra part of your work, of your creation. And that's something where people might get frustrated, and I actually understand that, because you develop your own stuff, you test it manually, and then you have to do more work. So that sometimes is frustrating for some developers. And that's why TWD, one of the reasons TWD wants to solve, to close the distance between adding your test and development. Because normally what people do, for me, in the development area, there are two types of people: the TDD approach and the ones that maybe add test after code. So most of the people add test after code, after they develop the feature, and the other ones, less percentage, try to use TDD. But TDD is really hard from the beginning of the project, and and not all developers are ready for that. So my idea to avoid that frustration is finding a solution in between, something that integrates with your development. I like to compare testing with GitHub or Git. When you are starting working with Git, it's a bit annoying because you want to make progress, you don't want pull requests, you don't want merge conflict. Everything is a little bit frustrating. But when you see the value, you start using it everywhere. Even if your own side projects, you use Git. So with test, for me, it's the same thing. You need a lot of learning, a lot of resources, good tooling. And once you have to get that, you really start to enjoy it a lot, the testing.
Okay. At what point did you notice like testing after development was not working?
For me, it's not working because sometimes when you are in a hurry, you try to avoid that test and you say, oh, we need to deliver fast and we have this bug or this kind of thing. And then you put the test aside, like another task, like maybe we will do it. It's not as good as, for example, with TDD. With TDD, you get the errors first and you provide a solution. But with testing after code, probably you will focus only in the happy parts and you don't have all the image of the problem, or you don't have time to add all the coverage for the problem. So for me, it's what we've been doing for all this year, and I think it's not working. It's not the best solution right now.
I see. And does also teaching Cypress help you becoming more focused on the testing aspect?
Yeah, Cypress is an amazing tool. I was actually an ambassador of Cypress a few years ago, a lot of time ago when Cypress was before B10. It was an amazing tool, and it was the first tool that I started working like with TWD. So basically, what I learned from Cypress is that you have this amazing mocking tooling like the intercept, and previously it was called CI route. And what you can do as a developer is having all of your scenarios in the front end and validate everything. So that's amazing because sometimes in the front you cannot validate errors without changing something in the API, or you cannot validate some scenarios that requires a specific user or a specific flow. So with Cypress, that was really amazing. But the problem is that Cypress becomes more and more focused on end-to-end with an amazing tool. I love Cypress with amazing tools like component testing and the dashboard and all these tools, the flakiness. And for me, it becomes a tool very heavy for development, and the developer needs to separate their workflow to start using this tool, this Cypress tool. The same happens with Playwright. For me, are an amazing tool for QA testers and also developers if they use it well, but it becomes a little too separated from the developer experience.
Okay. And what do you also think about complicated setups? Because many testing tools, they are like complicated things to do before you get started. And some people, they just give up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the worst thing because there are tools that are super hard to configure. Like Next.js, for example, or all these frameworks like SSR frameworks, it's super hard to configure testing tools and proper test. And actually, if you go to their website like Astro, Solid, they don't provide like you have to do the test like this way. They tell you use Playwright, use Cypress, and that's it. So the configuration super hard. Also with testing library, I mostly work with React, but with tools like testing library or btest or tooling that you run in your terminal, if you are testing frontend, uh, it's a bit abstract. So you only see the terminal. When you pop up errors, you actually really don't know what is happening in the browser. Well, it's not even a browser, it's just like a JS DOM browser. So the tooling is one of the reasons why most people give up in the testing, mostly in the front end.
So now we understand the different problems with the traditional testing. How did you get the idea to create a new framework?
I have been thinking in this idea for a while, like I would say 6 years, but I couldn't find the tooling and the proper setup that I was comfortable with. And the idea comes from that experience with Cypress. what I wanted for my front-end app, imagine a front-end app with a lot of microservices. So if you want to test that front-end app, you need to call, I don't know, maybe dev environment or have your own Docker Compose with a lot of scripts, or maybe some solution more complex like Kubernetes or Minikube or something like that. So what I did with Cypress was creating those mocks, like for example, mock service worker does. So you create those mocks, but you also have testing because you are basically developing with the Cypress browser. You use the Cypress browser, you write your test, and it's also your development, and you cover all the main scenarios. But like I mentioned, Cypress evolved to a different tool, and it was a little bit hard to adopt. You are in a different browser. You are not in your comfortable browser. So I started to thinking about in this idea of creating a new tool that covers that experience. Like basically you are developing, and also every step you are doing, you are writing a test. And that was my main idea, and I started working with that and developing this new tool.
For people who never heard about TWD, can you define it, what it is in simple terms?
Yes. Basically, it's a tool for developers. It's not for Q&A because it's focused on your developer experience. And it's a tool that it has multi-framework support. So you can use it in Angular, Vue, React, Solid, or any other framework, mostly for single-page application, and in a few sections for SSR application. And the tool, basically, what it does is enables a component in your browser, a sidebar, like the sidebar you have in Playwright UI or Cypress UI, and you have all of your tests in that sidebar. Then the tool needs the test, so you can create your own test, and for your own test, you can write it like if you are writing testing library test. So all of your knowledge with testing library, you can still apply it to TWD. Once you have those tests, you can click run all or play, and you will see in your browser or any browser you have open, Safari, Chrome, any terminal, any type of browser you want, you can execute the test you just built. So apart from that, has a mocking API where you can mock all of the requests that happen in your browser. It uses a service worker, and it allows you to mock any request. Like in Cypress, for example, the CI intercept is the same logic behind. So basically, if you want to develop a complex feature where you don't have maybe access yet, or you don't have the proper setup, you just only need to click play on the test that someone prepared or you or yourself prepare, and you have all the scenario mock, and your browser will be executing while you are clicking that play, and you will go to the page you want to test, and you see how the formula completes. So it's like you have your own Cypress in your own project or your own playwright.
Okay. And can you explain what differentiates TWD from TDD or testing library, for example?
Yes. So the approach of TWD, apart from the tool itself, is that you don't write your test before or after. You have to write it while you are developing. So, for example, if you are creating a new table, when you create a new table in a new screen, what you have to create is the page. So once you create the page, you have to write your test, and your test is visit that page. So you are writing the test while you are creating the table. For the table, you need data. So you create your mocks with that data. And once you have that, every time you go to that page in that test, you will get the same information. You have the control. And then you need to create the table. So once you create the table, you add your test. And for those tests, you use testing library with all the benefits that testing library has, like selectors, interaction, all of the tooling that testing library has. So the approach is different because it's while your development, and also you always have the test in your browser, so you can always click play, and continuously testing while you are developing. So you add new features, click play, or run all and execute all the tests. And it works like a normal test runner. You have a skip, you have only, you have all the options that a test runner offers.
And is it easy to test and develop? Because usually when you focus on bridging, you have momentum, and people think like when you're testing, you're doing a different things. You switch context, and it's difficult to get back.
I think it's easy because it's different from the experience with, for example, Playwright, Cypress, and testing library. Why? Because when you are working with Playwright or Cypress, you have like a different repo or a different folder, a different script. You have to run the browser, so it's totally different. It's not your development environment. And when you are writing testing library with btest or jest, basically you're working with a terminal. That's way different than your normal working in the front end. But with this tool, you have always the sidebar, and the test can live along with your pages or your components. So basically you are one click from adding a test. And when you add the test, you can click play and automate one of your tasks. Imagine if you are in that momentum building a complex form with different steps. So you can write as simple commands, and then when you click play, you are skipping all the manual writing while you're developing. So imagine you have a form with 3 or 4 steps, and you want to test only the 4th step, even manually. So why don't you create your own TWD to automate the first 3 steps, filling all the form fields, and clicking play just to go there? Maybe it's not a test, but at least it's something that like kind of like a shortcut for your development. But it's still a test because you can run it also in CI, that we will talk maybe later.
Okay, so having a test runner live inside your application, does it change the way you develop as well?
You can still like work like you used to. For example, you create your feature and then you add your test. But once you have that alongside you, it's super easy to say, okay, I have this, then I'm going to click play and continue from that. So it depends on your approach, but in my experience and with my teams, for them, it changed the way they work because they start adding more text.
Good, thank you. So now we understand what is TWG. Let's talk about some good practice. How do you save time with TWG compared to other frameworks?
What I like about TWD is that you focus on features. You are not focused like on implementation of the components or how it's displayed. You are mostly focused on features, and that's why it uses testing library, because testing library with the accessibility roles and all of the good practice they have, it's easier to focus on those features. So it saves you a lot of time, mostly when you have the test. At the beginning, maybe it's hard because you need to prepare the mocks or prepare these scenarios. But once you have that, it's amazing because imagine if you join a project, a complex project, and you need to work on some React feature, and of course you are a really good React developer, but sometimes when you join a project, you need a lot of context. You need .env files, you need users to access the application, you need a lot of stuff. But with this tool, you only need to hit the play button and go to that page that has a bug or needs an improvement. So you just click play, everything runs, and all the mocks run, and you go to that page. Or imagine if there's a bug, and you know it's because some changes in the API or in the flow. You just need to change the mock and simulate just by clicking play. You simulate the error, fix it, click play again, error is fixed, and test is covering that error. So once you have that first setup of test, you increase your speed a lot. And also it works as a documentation, a living documentation, because you test the features. So if you go to that test, you can read it and say, okay, this test does this. And if I don't know what it does, I just go to my favorite browser, click play, and see where it goes, that test. You can also, as it is running in the browser, you can put a debugger, like a normal debugger you use in the browser, and then you can go step by step through this test. You don't need a CI debug or a special command, because you are actually running in the browser the TWD test.
Okay. And for someone new to TWD, what common mistake they usually make?
Um, I would say they struggle with testing library a lot. like because we try to promote the use of ARIA roles and accessibility roles. So sometimes they struggle with that and they get like errors in in their app because maybe the accessibility is not really good, and they blame the selectors of testing library, but the selectors of testing library are really good. But the problem is the app maybe is not as accessible as that. And also the use of selectors like or test IDs, they try to use that too much. For me, I prefer to use accessibility roles. So that's sometimes some errors in the TWD.
Okay. And can you also explain what a good TWD test looks like?
Yeah, a good TWD test is like a feature. Like imagine you have to create a login, complete a form, or create an update form. So a good TWD test is all that feature. Like go to the page, prepare your setup with all the mocks you need to prepare, execute your actions, which will be complete the form, trigger the mutation, and validate that you are sending the correct info. That's a really important point in TWD is that you can mock your data, which is amazing because you can mock empty results, error results, any status or any HTTP status you want. But you could also mock the mutation, the post, the patch, and that's pretty cool because you can decide what to respond. But in the TWD API, there's a method that allows you to validate the request you are creating. So if you are doing the front end and you are doing a request to an API, if you ensure that the payload is the one that API expects, you do your job properly. So if everything fails from that, it's maybe a problem in the API or a problem in the integration or in the infrastructure. So it's more like a problem that a QA or a monitoring system would detect, but it's not a problem with your front end code. So that's a really good point when you are doing TWD, that if you do mutations like post, delete, you check also what you are sending to the API, and the TWD API allows you to do that. There are some methods to validate that.
Okay. And does it catch a lot of data error as well?
Well, it depends. It depends. But I guess it does because when you are doing the mocking, it's code that you have in your project. So you can attach the interface you have in your project. So if you copy one of the mocks from the network and paste it in your project, the TypeScript is going to tell you that you are missing some fields or something changed. And that's going to warn you, and you will be ready to ask the backend team to what's going on in this API.
Okay. And are you also mentioned like area roles? How does it ensure like your code is robust and inclusive in every line?
So that's pretty interesting because you have the option to use testing library with all the good selectors, and we try to follow that you use first by role, then by text, and last option is test ID. But the other thing interesting from TWD that I don't know if Cypress or Playwright has is that the tool itself, those tests that you have on the right side or left side of your browser, is accessible, that tool. So it has each test has their own area label for the buttons. If you fail a test, we use area live to notify the users from screen readers that the test failed. So the tool itself is accessible. We use for the collapsibles all the area elements, the correct area elements. So we also care about that that if you write a behavior test in your code editor, you could also test it in the browser and receive feedback, even if you use a screen reader. So there's also accessibility in the tool itself, and of course, with all the good practices from testing library, you can ensure that your app has a good accessibility. But that's more part of the development process, and the team. The team needs to be aware of how to properly test accessibility and how to create accessible website.
Okay. And when I completed my test, is it okay just to aim for 100% coverage and then you will be fine?
That's a interesting one. The coverage topic is it's a good one. These tests are able to gather recollect coverage, and also you get a lot of coverage with fewer tests than with the unit test because you are testing features and you go through the whole flow of the app. What we promote in TWD is that you get your coverage tool and you need to focus in your feature happy paths and non-happy paths scenarios. And once you get that done, you can go to the coverage report. And if there are missing gaps, you can still add unit tests to cover those missing gaps that maybe are harder with an integration test or this feature testing with the TWD. For me, the number is not like really important, like getting that 100%, because you can add unit just to cover 100%, but maybe it's not relevant, those tests. But for me, the important part of coverage is finding those missing gaps. Like, okay, I did this feature, and if I check the coverage, the most important part of the logic is not covered. So maybe my tests are really bad. So I need to rework on that, or maybe I need to add unit tests. You can run unit tests in TWD. That's not a problem. And we promote that. Like you have to use coverage to find missing gaps and place where you need to focus. So, but yeah, we can collect coverage in TWD.
Okay, got it. So now I totally understand how it can help. Now let's talk about how to get started with this tool. Can you explain to us what is the TWD sidebar a little bit for somebody new to it?
Yes. So imagine you started a new project with, I don't know, Angular, Vue, or React, or any framework you like. So once you start a project, you install this dependency. It's just one command, and you copy and paste from the getting started a few lines that you configure in your project, and then in your application, it pops a sidebar without test that has a close button and a button that says run all and clear mocks. Then when you start adding tests, which is basically create a file with a name and maybe an extension called .twd.test.ts or any extension you want, then you write that test and it appears on your sidebar. So you have your app doesn't change. You can still working on that app. You can close the sidebar and still working without adding tests, or you can open and click play and go to a place, close the sidebar. It's something that it's integrated in your app. It's kind of like if you imagine backend, it's like if you're having your own Postman in the front end. So you can trigger API calls in Postman. Here you can trigger your actions in the front end, and all those actions are recorded in commands that are deterministic. So basically, you can repeat those tests and retry anytime you want.
Okay. And is there also a way to report a bug before you touch the features?
Yes, you can imagine if you find a bug in the application and you report it. So most of the times you do a research. Maybe it's a failure in the network request, in the response, or in the component because some conditions. You can reproduce it, and then the bug will appear in your app. And once you reproduce it, you can just fix it the bug itself. So like you're testing your app, so it's really easy to see what's going
Okay.
on, your bug and errors.
Okay. And is it also easy to debug? You have different methodology for that?
Yes, what we do is the assertions from the test have a really nice output. So you get in the sidebar the output and also in the terminal. So if you need to compare objects or something that is missing, you can check it there. Like I mentioned before, this is running in your browser, so you can use all of the debugging tools you have in the browser. So you can enable the debugger and go line by line, adding breakpoints. So any tool that you use for debugging browser, you can use it for TWD because your tests are basically inside your browser.
Okay. And you also mentioned API earlier. So do you also have here some tips to manage the messy or bad real world data API?
Yeah, that's where most of the bugs we receive when working with TWD, like the missing or changes in the API. So, like I mentioned, TWD runs in your browser. So here you can imagine a solution for the API thing, like maybe create a few tests to validate the contracts of the API before using technologies in the browser like Fetch or Axios or any tool you have installed in your project. And you can use those tools to validate the data from the API before running the test. That's depend more or less on the strategy you want. The thing is, the code runs in your browser, so you could only run the code that it's able to execute there.
Okay. And how do you transition from your local environment to CI/CD pipeline like GitHub Action?
Yeah. So local is really simple. It's like I mentioned, npm install the library and then npm run whatever script you have to run your app. That's local. And then you have your sidebar, click play, run all. That's local. What about like you ask CI/CD, which
Yeah.
is really important, right? So in TWD, it's really easy. You have a command called TWD dash CLI run. And what it does under the hood is it runs a Puppeteer browser, a headless browser, and eh, go to your website and execute the test. But it doesn't click play. What it does is that all TWD is exposed in the window object and the runner is exposed there. So any tool like Puppeteer or Playwright, if you want to test different browsers, can access to that window object and execute the runner. And the runner is going to run the test. No need to open the sidebar and click play on each button. No, no, no. Only the window and it will execute the test. And it executes pretty fast because it's running in the browser. No need to run any different browser. It's just you run the app and then it executes with that script. Pretty simple.
Okay, I got it. And for beginners who are interested in this tool, is there any resource and repo you recommend to get started?
I would recommend the official docs. We have twd.dev, and that's the official docs. We have their tutorials, different integration for different frameworks. We also have a tooling for AI, like context, because as a new tool, sometimes the AI gets messy with the autocomplete or the agent. So we have resources for that. We also have some skills for TWD and MCPs. We also have MCPs. And I would say the official docs, there are talks there, also tutorials. So that's the best place to learn. And we also have examples for Angular, Vue, Solid, different for Auth 0. We also have examples.
Mm. And I also notice you have a strong community of developers, especially in Spain.
Yes, yes, yes. In Spain is where most people is right now trying this tool, because I work as a teacher in some of schools here, tech school here in Spain, and some of these new students are trying to work on that, giving feedback of the tool. So yeah, we have a strong community here.
Okay, yeah, thank you, got it. And just beyond this tool, how does mastering this mindset can help a developer like you move from developer to architect role faster?
So I like the mindset related to TWD because it's not just for front end. So TWD, the sidebar tool, it's a result of a need to have this mindset. Like you are doing test and you are developing, and the front end tools were not there. They were really separated from development. And for backend or mobile or any kind of software you want to develop, this mentality and we also save you a lot of time. We have in the documentation a manifesto, like a set of rules. Basically, you can apply that to any area of software. Like keep your test runner open every time you are developing, so you get feedback all the time. Every manually test you do, try to check it. If it's an API that saves in a database, automate that with a test. I don't mind the language, but automate that. Don't do it manually. Go into the Beaver or Postman. Automate that. Let like your test guide you, so you use it as a living documentation. Use coverage for find gaps. So that sort of mentality, I think it applies to any area, front end, back end, or mobile. You only need to find your tools to get that. In backend, it's quite easy, but in front, it wasn't, and that's why the sidebar was created.
Okay. And beyond this tool, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to get started on what to start on, what to focus on, and advice you would like to give them?
About this type of testing or testing in general?
No, I mean in general, like
Yeah.
to grow the career, for example, or to get started.
Yeah, for me, it's just listen to this kind of places where where other people that have experience share their knowledge. And what I would say is just try new things, try if it works for you, but try it for real, not just prompting to AI. Try for real, experience with that, have the all of the issues those tools sometimes you found, and you can also continue learning from other places. So learning right now is super easy because everything is accessible, like it's podcast or any sort of course. So keep learning the basic, the fundamentals. Don't spend too much time if you are learning something new. Don't spend too much time with AI, or at least ask you to explain what it's doing, and then you will grow your career much faster.
Okay. And speaking of AI, how do you see the industry of developer heading in the future?
I think it's heading a lot towards AI and more on writing specs than writing code. And in TWD, we are trying to jump into that. So because what we want is to keep the philosophy, like, okay, use AI, it's fine. But if you want to double check, you just need to go to the sidebar, click play, and validate. And what we recently deployed and published in npm is a package called TWD Relay, which basically connects your agents like Cloud Code or Cursor to your test. So imagine you have your browser open and you have your terminal of Cloud Code or your Cursor, and you are asking, I want to add a new feature and also create your TWD test. And if you want, you can test while you develop. And what it does, this tool is enables a communication between agent and the browser. And what you will see is the agent start working, and you watch your browser being executing the test while the agent is working. So you can sit on your chair, seeing the agent work and see the test running while you are waiting for the agent to respond. So it's not like a playwright MCP that runs under the hood. You actually are watching in live the test running, and this communication between the agents is made with sockets. So the token usage is way lower than MCP tools like the playwright, but way lower. Like you have to test it to see it, but yeah, it's way lower. The only inconvenience is you need to jump into the TWD mindset. But for me, it's not inconvenient.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that was my last question. Do you have anything you want to add? I did not ask you about the final advice for people listening to.
The only thing is, the docs, official docs, twd.dev. Try it. All feedback is welcome. We're evolving the feature as much as we can, and keep learning, keep trying. Don't use AI just for repeated tasks. And if you want to learn new things, go to internet, listen this kind of podcast, or try we encode it, and everything will went well.
Okay, so thank you very much, Kevin. That was a great conversation. I've learned a lot from you and from your expertise, so I'm grateful for your time.
Thank you.
If people want to connect with you, I will share your LinkedIn profile so they can reach out to you and ask questions. The link for your dev communities when you publish and blog a lot. I'll share also the series testing while developing, from getting started, core conception, automation, metrics, the Node.js steps to get started, on the open source tool to get started on NPM. So yeah, that's it for me. So thank you very much again. That concludes today's episode of How to Test This. I hope you found this episode valuable. If you did, share it with your colleagues and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We will continue to learn from experts about how they test. So I'm Mamadou. This was How to Test This. Thank you and see you next time. Thank you.